Tonight we go to a world floating among the clouds, where secrets drift just beneath the surface, and one final mission waits to unfold beneath the moonlit gas giant of Bespin. This is a Star Wars tale told softly and slowly, for listeners seeking calm amidst the stars. In this story, you'll join a retired rebel pilot, older now, quieter, drawn back into a secret operation in the lower levels of Cloud City. The Empire may be gone, but shadows still linger, and old pilots never truly leave the sky behind. Before we begin, if you're enjoying these quiet journeys through your favorite universes, you can support this channel by subscribing now or exploring the playlist below for more bedtime adventures. Your presence keeps this galaxy alive. Now, settle in. Let the hum of Cloud City guide your thoughts. Let your imagination float. Cloud City hung beneath the pinkish sky like a dream half-remembered, the sun having long since dipped behind the swirling gas horizon of Bespin, leaving only a band of gold at the edge of the world, and the city, that elegant halo of durasteel and duraglass, shone like a silent chandelier drifting in the heavens, light humming softly through its vast circular corridors. The great Tibana processing chambers below whispering their work into the deep blue silence, and standing at the viewport of a borrowed shuttle, Captain Ronan Vire watched it all with eyes too tired for sentiment and too quiet for anger, his breath fogging slightly on the glass as the shuttle banked left into the lower approach lanes. Far below the upper towers where Lando Calrissian once ruled with flair and danger and the occasional smuggler's grace, and even farther from the polished walkways where Han Solo had once vanished into carbonite and betrayal, memories rising, like steam in the cold parts of Ronan's mind. Because this wasn't a mission of nostalgia, it was one final favor and one last flight beneath the clouds. Ronan was older now, and his flight jacket, once proud with Alliance colors, had faded to something like anonymity, though the inside pocket still held the same folded holopic of his old squadron, grinning in front of an X-wing on Yavin 4, back before the sky turned deadly, before pilots had to disappear into civilian lives and hang up their wings like broken promises. And now, years after the Battle of Endor, after Jakku, after the galaxy had fractured into 1,000 names for peace, he found himself summoned not by command, but by code. A ripple in the old rebellion net, an encrypted request, buried in flight jargon, signed only, "Your wing still casts a shadow," and he'd known who it was from without reading the signature. A slicer named Tira he hadn't seen since Sullust, sharp-tongued and faster than light when a console was in front of her. And if she was asking for help in Cloud City's forgotten underbelly, then someone somewhere had stirred the ash that should have stayed buried. The shuttle docked without sound, magnetic clamps kissing the underhang of platform Delta 6, far beneath the tourist zones and refurbished gambling halls, and Ronan stepped out with his duffel slung low, a small maintenance droid clicking behind him, not an astromech but close, a square-headed rust box called Drip, who'd once ferried parts to B-wings before retiring with him to a quieter sort of life. And the moment Ronan set foot on the platform, the air changed. Not just the smell, which was damp and faintly chemical like frozen fog over old engines, but the feeling in the Force, or something like it, like a gravity heavier than gravity, a sense of being watched by ghosts, even though he wasn't Force-sensitive, not truly, just worn in the way that made men feel things before they saw them. And as the loading bay doors slid open on a quiet hiss, a cloaked figure stepped from the shadows of a half-lit stairwell, her voice as dry as her wit, saying, Took you long enough, Captain Vire. Either your shuttle's slow or your heart's not in this. And Ronan smiled a little because Tira hadn't changed at all, still dressed like a shadow, pretending not to care, data pads hanging from her belt like knives. She didn't offer a hug, and he didn't need one. They walked without speaking for a while, through dim halls where old Imperial wiring still blinked behind cracked panels, past doors long welded shut and pipes that hissed steam in gentle intervals like the breath of a sleeping city. And finally, they reached the nest, a forgotten control room tucked into the industrial ring, lit only by a ring of monitors and blue-coded maps showing pulse nodes and signal relays, and one red zone at the center blinking like a heartbeat. And Tira explained as she worked, her fingers gliding over keys with no wasted movement. They reactivated an old surveillance net under the city, left over from Imperial rule. We think, or maybe something newer, they're tracking movement in these sectors using sensors embedded in the damn Tibana pipelines. I don't know who they are, but they're good, and they're quiet. Too quiet for first-order grunts. Someone setting up shop beneath Cloud City, and we need to shut them down before they go live. And Ronan, watching the maps shift and blink and hum, simply asked, "What do you need me to fly?" And her answer was a grin and a flicker of her eyes toward a console marked Node Control Relay 9B, hovering over a tunnel with active defenses and a failing atmospheric lock. "Nothing fancy," she said softly. "Just one last trench run through a forgotten part of the city, in zero visibility, with no backup, and maybe some light sabotage if we're lucky." And Ronan exhaled through his nose, slow and steady, like an old pilot adjusting to thin air, and the silence between them held the weight of 100. They're ghosts. And in that moment he knew he wouldn't be leaving quietly. The city above might sparkle with light and laughter, but down here, the sky was made of metal, and it had sharp edges, and somewhere deep in the echo of Cloud City's heart, something had started watching back. The trench beneath the towers. The lower trench was colder than Ronan expected, not from ice or weather, there was none down here, but from neglect, a kind of mechanical chill that settled into the bones through soundless vents and unlit corridors where moisture clung to. The walls and old repulsor lift scars painted long-forgotten routes across Durasteel. And as he descended into the access shaft, with drip clamped to his back like a humming backpack, the only sound was the soft churn of magnetic treads, the hiss of his breath behind the rebreather mask, and the distant echo of forgotten machinery. Sighing in the depths, a lullaby for ghosts who never made it out of the war, Tira's voice crackled in his ear. Low and grainy through the antique comlink they used to avoid pinging anything sensitive, her words crisp despite the distance. "Node Relay 9B is below your position, about 30 meters of vertical shaft, then a crawl space that feeds into the maintenance channel. Should be inactive, but don't trust the silence. We've lost 2 probes trying to map it." And Ronan grunted his reply, pressing gloved fingers against the shaft wall until he found the embedded latch, a small panel that blinked once, then slid open with the sluggishness of age, revealing a narrow descent tube lit in flickering green, like some long-forgotten throat swallowing him into the belly of the city. The climb was slow, deliberate, silent, each rung a whisper, every echo amplified into soft thunder in his ears. And halfway down, the lights blinked out completely, leaving only the faint glow of his helmet display and the pulse of Drip's indicator light, like a firefly clinging to his shoulder. And for a heartbeat longer than it should have been, he paused, not for fear, but for something older. A sense of being observed, not seen but noticed, the way animals sense tremors before they happen. The way pilots feel when the radar shows nothing, but every nerve screams incoming, and he shook it off like frost on a cockpit, pressed on, and emerged into a crawl space, just wide enough to drag himself forward elbows first. The air was warm, damp, metallic, the floor slick with condensation, the walls pulsing faintly with unused power lines, veins of forgotten circuits that buzzed under his forearm as he moved, and every meter forward carried the weight of years. This was Imperial tech, no question, but someone had kept it alive, barely, like an old lung wheezing in the dark. And as he reached the final vent and popped the cover open with a careful twist, he saw it. The relay node chamber, lit in a low amber wash, cables like roots curling from a central pylon, monitors lining the wall with green script that scrolled like breath, and standing in front of it all was nothing. No guards, no movement, just machines humming like monks in meditation. And Ronan dropped down slow, boots whispering against the grating as Drip hovered behind him, scanning the room with a low chime of curiosity. And he moved to the console, pulled out the data spike Tira had given him, a polished sliver etched with rebellion code, and slipped it into the access port, the screen flaring once with resistance before fading into a map of sectors, pulse lines, and blinking. Beacons marked with small red diamonds, and Tira's voice returned. "You're in. Good, I'm rerouting their eyes for 60 seconds. After that, someone might notice, get what we need, and ghost out." But as Ronan's gloved hand tapped through the data feeds, one window expanded on its own, unprompted, and what filled. The screen wasn't surveillance, it was movement, live movement, a thermal feed from a lower corridor showing two humanoid figures in black armor gliding through steam, almost soundless, their heat signatures masked by some kind of cloaking. Tech. And behind them slithered something else, something cold, unreadable, a void on the thermal scan where a third figure should have been, and Ronan whispered, "Not Imperial," just as the console let out a soft click and dimmed the lights. In the chamber, dropping into red standby mode, then everything moved too fast and too quiet. Drip buzzed a warning, spun around just as the vent Ronan had entered through hissed open again, not from above, but from pressure below, and a black-gloved hand reached through, followed by the sleek helmet of a scout trooper. But this armor was different, sleek, matter unmarked, as if whoever wore it wanted no symbol, no cause, only silence, and Ronan moved on instinct, grabbing the nearest data cable and yanking it loose with a spark, then slamming the pylon switch, overloading the chamber with a burst of static and flickering light, just enough to blind the sensors, confuse the systems, cover his exit as he vaulted toward the emergency shaft at the back of the room. Blaster fire hummed once, low and muffled, a stun bolt that scraped the edge of the wall beside his shoulder, and Drip spun to fire a counterpulse from its shock port, not to hit, but to delay, to scatter the entry team's advance. And then Ronan was through the hatch, sliding down, an old waste pipe, hands braced, boots skidding against the metal walls as steam roared past his ears, and the scent of ozone and oil rushed up his nose like an old hangar coming to life. And when he finally hit the lower maintenance tunnel with a grunt, the pain in his knees told him just how long it had been since he'd done this kind of work. Tira's voice again, sharper now. "What happened? You dropped off feed for 10 seconds. What did you see?" And Ronan, panting quietly, already pushing forward into the next shaft, muttered, "We've got company. Not Empire, not local. These ones don't want to be known. And in the distance, too faint to be real." He thought he heard footsteps. Or not footsteps, but something heavier, softer, like weight shifting through steam. The city was no longer just watching. It was hunting. The watchers in the fog. The fog in the lower maintenance ring wasn't like anything Ronan remembered from his time-flying escort runs over industrial platforms. This wasn't exhaust or coolant mist, or the light hiss of atmospheric regulators keeping Cloud City stable. This was thick, hanging vapor, warm and wet and somehow too quiet. The kind that made your ears ring because even the sound of your breath seemed swallowed before it reached you. And as he moved through the narrow service corridor, Drip hovering a step behind, with its low-frequency hum dialed down to near silent, he kept one hand near the sidearm, holstered beneath his coat. Not drawn yet. Drawing would be noise, and noise would be permission. The tunnel curved left and then sharply right, the walls sweating with condensation that dripped from overhead valves like rain in slow motion. And overhead, the low thrum of Cloud City's processing plants became a steady heartbeat, muffled by layers of metal and memory. And with every step deeper into the trench, Ronan felt the weight of altitude reverse itself. Here, beneath the sky, it was the ceiling pressing down, the weight of a floating city heavy. On his shoulders, as if gravity were emotional, not physical, Tira was quiet now. She'd said only, "I lost your signal, rerouting," and that was minutes ago, which meant he was on his own. Something moved ahead, not fast, not sharp, but just enough to cause a shift in the air, like the wake of a presence through fog, and he stopped. Crouched, rested one hand on the floor to listen. Not with ears, but with skin, like the old trick his captain taught him on Dantooine when learning to feel the tremble of enemy tanks in tall grass. And here it came again. Softer this time, almost human, almost not. He rose and moved forward, slow and low. And the passage opened into a wide chamber, some kind of distribution junction filled with old control panels, yellowed transparent steel windows, and half-collapsed ductwork wrapped in vines of exposed wiring. And as he stepped inside, he noticed that the fog didn't fill this room naturally. It was pumping in through deliberate filters along the upper vents, artificial, intentional, like stage smoke for something that didn't want to be seen. That's when he saw them, two silhouettes, standing perfectly still just beyond the far bulkhead, partially obscured by steam and shadow. Armored, lean, tall, their helmets matte black with narrow visors like slits of midnight. And on their backs, short antennae blinked faint red in rhythmic intervals, as if tuned to something not of this place, not of this city. And Ronan dropped into cover behind a fallen pipe coil just before one turned its head, slow and deliberate, as though it had already known he was there and was only waiting for him to realize it. He didn't move, didn't breathe, and when he finally risked a glance, they were gone. No footsteps, no sound, no trace. Only the fog, swirling slightly where they'd stood, like vapor, remembering the shape of something now vanished. Drip beeped once, soft and questioning, and Ronan tapped its sensor dome gently to silence it, then activated the old floor map projected on the console beside him, flickering, cracked but usable, and found a route leading deeper toward the signal relay's secondary node, marked in the map as Echo Control, which Tira had mentioned in a half-sentence before the line cut, something about controlling access to the uplink tower's inner feed. And if this thing, this organization, was planting surveillance, again under Cloud City, then that feed would be the route, the branch you cut to stop the whole tree from whispering. As he moved through the next passage, The fog began to thin, replaced by a deeper hum, the sound of more active systems, still, running despite the city's disuse of these lower layers. And ahead, he saw faint flickers of light, not from fixtures, but from the moving sweep of scanners, red beams crisscrossing at intervals, like the breathing of an ancient droid. He timed it, waited, then slipped between the intervals, low to the ground, his body a shadow among shadows. He moved beneath a row of dormant atmospheric pumps, then slid into a side chamber where he froze. A shape was crouched in the corner, small, humanoid, unmoving. He approached slowly, cautiously, every step a prayer of silence. And when he reached the figure, his breath caught. It was a child, or had been wrapped in a ragged worker's uniform, its chest wrapped in sensor wire, eyes closed, still but not quite lifeless. Its skin was pale but not bloodless, like someone in stasis, not death. And Ronan crouched, placed 2 fingers to the neck, and felt the faintest flicker of warmth beneath skin. That's when the chamber lights flicked on all at once. A humming, cold electric wash of white light filled the room, and from the ceiling, a dozen red dots flickered into view like stars emerging from cloud. They weren't alone. Ronan grabbed the child's body gently and turned to run, the corridor behind him lighting with distant footsteps, calm, deliberate. More than 2, maybe. 4, maybe more, and none in a rush. The Watchers weren't here to chase, they were here to observe what he would do. And in the humming hush of Cloud City's forgotten veins, the sky above slept peacefully, unaware that something beneath had begun to breathe and watch back. Echo control. He didn't stop running until the silence felt louder than his footsteps, until the corridors blurred together into one long tunnel of breath and metal, until even Drip's hover whine felt like thunder in his ears. And when he finally slid into the corridor marked Access Route Delta 19, he ducked beneath a hanging pipe and let the shadows swallow him whole. The child still bundled in his arms, lighter than expected, warm but unmoving, breathing shallow like someone halfway between sleep and memory. And Ronan crouched low in the dark, eyes adjusting to the green glow of faded direction lights crawling along the floor like luminous moss. The silence now deeper, not just lack of noise, but a presence. A listening ahead lay Echo Control, the uplink junction where Cloud City's deepest transmission channels fed into the surface network, a relic of Imperial surveillance built into the city's foundations before Lando ever touched it, now supposed to be defunct, dark, overwritten. But Tira had been right. The system wasn't just alive, it was awake, and whatever it was watching for had just found him. The child stirred as he laid them gently beside the doorframe, not quite conscious, not quite gone. And Drip ran a soft scan with a whisper beep of concern, the data pulsing into Ronan's wristband. Faint life signs, low neural activity, stasis induction likely chemical, no signs of scarring or implants. Whoever this kid was, they weren't part of the machine. Not yet. And that meant whoever left them here wasn't finished. Ronan turned to the access panel, wiped away a smear of old dust, and tapped in the code Tira had hardwired into the data spike. Static hissed from the speaker grill, then a soft click, and the blast door to Echo Control slid open, not with a screech, but with a gentle sigh, as though the system expected him inside. The room stretched longer than expected, lit in cold white lines embedded in the ceiling. Every surface clean in a way that didn't match the rest of the forgotten tunnels. Sterile and symmetrical, the floor a grid of soft metal plates, and in the center stood a tower of consoles rising like a spine into the ceiling, blinking with Input requests, code loops, and pulses of data flickering across a dozen mirrored screens. And here, in this cold heart, the watchers had left their touch. Symbols etched into the console glass, not in BASIC, not in Aurebesh, but in something older, curving runes that pulsed softly as Ronan approached, like they knew he was there. He stepped forward and pressed one hand to the console, and it responded instantly, not with an alarm, but a hum, a low resonance that vibrated through the floor and into his boots, into his bones, into the air itself, like the very structure of the city was echoing back his presence, as though it had been waiting for his voice all along. Tira's voice snapped back into his earpiece, urgent and brittle. "You're back, gods! I thought you were... Never mind, listen. You need to pull the primary uplink logs now. I've traced the signal. It's not just tapping into city feeds, Ronan. It's broadcasting out, somewhere beyond the system, like it's talking to something bigger, something off-world." He moved fast now, fingers dancing across the unfamiliar interface, using instincts, older than memory. Some systems still obeyed the old Alliance logic layers buried beneath, and he found the uplink trace, initiated the download, the console glowing red-orange as data poured into the spike, fast, too fast, like the machine wanted him to see. And then everything stopped. Not the system, not the light. Everything. His breath froze in his lungs. Drip's hum ceased mid-pulse. Even the child's shallow breathing beside the door paused, like time itself had bent inward. And across the room, at the far wall of glass, something appeared. A figure, tall, too tall, limbs hidden in a cloak that moved like mist underwater. No face, no light, just presence. A shape not cast by light but by absence, like space had decided to imitate form, and though it made no sound, no gesture, Ronan knew it was watching him, not in the way a person watches, but in the way deep oceans wait for someone to fall in. He didn't speak, couldn't, and yet he felt the message like thunder behind the eyes. "You do not belong here." Then the light snapped. The screens flickered into random glyphs, and Drip let out a strangled electronic whine as it rebooted beside him. The moment gone, the figure vanished like fog retreating from Sun. Ronan ripped the spike from the console, sealed the download, and turned on instinct, grabbing the child, signaling Drip with a flash of fingers to map him the fastest way out. Tira's voice cut back in, shaken. The signal's breaking up again. "Ronan, what's happening down there?" He didn't answer, didn't need to. Behind him, echo control, dimmed to black, and somewhere in the deep layers of Cloud City, an eye had opened, and now it knew his name. Beneath the core wind, the route Drip mapped pulsed across Ronan's wrist display like a slow heartbeat. Glowing lines curling through subdecks and auxiliary shafts too old for most maps. Channels once used to vent Cloud City's thermal overflow back into Bespin's upper atmosphere, unused now, half collapsed, forgotten by everyone except the wind. And it was through these veins of breathless machinery that Ronan now moved. Child pressed gently to his chest, their weight feather-light but very real, still alive, still unmoving. And Drip hovered just ahead, its scanning light turned low, barely more than a shimmer through the steam. They had descended past echo controls. Perimeter before the systems rebooted, before the watchers could track them, and now they were beneath the uplink tower, where the city's spine narrowed into old venting arrays and pressure balancers that moaned softly as they expanded and contracted with the planet's gases, creating a sound that wasn't quite wind and not quite breath, a constant exhale that carried through the ducts like Cloud City itself, was sighing in its sleep. The corridors here were round, ribbed, covered in frost, laced with mineral veins, and as Ronan stepped through each one, the floor echoed slightly beneath his boots. A hollow ring that reminded him of old hangars on Yavin, where sound stretched long and memory stretched longer, and for a time there was only this, the low hum of metal beneath footfalls, the rising mist of breath, the silent urgency of flight. But then the hum changed. Not louder, but sharper, like a tone shift in music, or a distant harmonic slipping slightly off-key. And Ronan slowed, pressed his hand to the wall and listened, not for footsteps, but for vibration, the ripple of something moving not on the floor, but through it, like a shadow crawling along the spine of the city. He turned to Drip, signed a question, and the droid pulsed back a short sequence. Movement detected approximately 40 meters. Above, following a mirrored path, speed unknown, but consistent. And for the first time in hours, Ronan felt the familiar edge of adrenaline, not as fear, but as focus. The sensation of a cockpit lighting up beneath his hands. Decisions arriving. Before thought they were being tracked, not just watched. The watchers weren't content to observe anymore. They were closing in. He picked up the pace, breath even, child still held close, and the corridor curved downward, spiraling slightly. The wind rising now, not from machines, but from pressure differentials, air currents twisting through tight spaces, howling low and constant, like the voice of the city itself warning him to move faster. And ahead, the wall glowed faint blue, bioluminescent lichen curling around an old fusion cap, casting the passage in dreamlike glow. It was beautiful, in a way that didn't belong here, like life refusing to leave the shadows. And then the voice returned, not Tira, not comm chatter, not even spoken, just a presence like a single tone buried deep in his chest, like someone humming behind a door you don't remember closing. And again, it wasn't a sound but a knowing. You carry what does not belong. Ronan kept moving, didn't look back, because if he did, he knew he would see it, whatever it was. The shape from Echo Control, or its echo, or its echo's master. And though he wasn't force-sensitive, not really, he felt something deeper now, something ancient, the way pilots sense gravity shifts before instruments catch it, the way you know you're falling before the drop begins. Drip let out a high-pitched chime, signaling a vertical shaft just ahead, one that would bring them into a compressed tunnel lined with repulsor lift stabilizers, long dormant, now just glowing, blue with residual energy. And he climbed in, pulling the child with him as carefully as he could, ascending hand over hand on the inner rails as the wind howled louder, screaming upward through the shaft like a warning left too late halfway up. He paused, not from strain, but from stillness. The wind had stopped completely. Drip hovered below, frozen mid-rise. The lights along the stabilizer shaft blinked out one by one from below, and then the presence returned, not seen, not touched, but felt behind the heart, and a whisper, not from the walls, not from air, but from inside. The signal has been received, they are coming. And then the lights snapped back on, the wind returned with a roar, and Ronan scrambled the last few meters upward, boots slipping against the rail, chest tight, eyes burning, heart steady despite everything. And when he crawled out onto the grated floor of the next corridor, he didn't stop to rest, only nodded once to Drip and moved on, because now he knew they weren't just watching Cloud City, they were using it as a door, and the child he carried wasn't just a victim, they were the key. The open door, The corridor ahead was wrong in ways Ronan couldn't name, not broken or warped or decayed like the others, but too clean, too symmetrical, as though something had rebuilt it, not repaired, rewritten, like a memory revisited too often and smoothed of all sharpness. And as he stepped inside, the air shifted again, no longer warm and foggy, but crisp and thin, like the vacuum near an open airlock. And behind him, the stabilizer shaft sealed shut with a slow metallic groan, the panel lights dimming as if bowing. Out of existence, and Ronan said nothing, because silence now felt like the only language allowed here. Drip hovered behind him without sound, its usual beeps and diagnostic murmurs absent, like it too understood that something deeper than programming had taken hold, and in his arms, the child stirred, not fully awake, but no longer still, eyes fluttering faintly beneath pale lids, lips parting in whispers too soft to be words, as though they were listening rather than dreaming. And as Ronan moved deeper into the corridor, the walls began to change. They shifted from metal to stone, not carved, but grown, their surfaces etched, with the same runes he'd seen in Echo Control. Spirals and slashes and graceful curves that glowed faintly like frost-catching starlight, and the floor beneath his boots rang softer now, not with the clang of steel, but the hush of old tile. And here, beneath a city that floated above clouds, and war and memory, something ancient had taken root or had never left, and Ronan didn't question it anymore, because some truths couldn't be understood, only accepted. The corridor ended in a single archway, no door, no lock, just an opening framed by stone older than any technology he knew, and within, a circular chamber pulsed with pale blue light, its center occupied by a plinth of black crystal, faceted and humming with layered resonance like a chord held in slow, eternal vibration, and above it floated a sphere of liquid light, gently spinning, shimmering with echoes of other places, other stars, other times, and the moment Ronan stepped. Inside, everything went still again. The hum stopped, his breath paused mid-inhale, and the light turned. It faced him. Not as a thing might turn, but as awareness turns, as the gaze of a sleeping god might shift when disturbed. And the chamber vibrated softly, not with threat, but with vastness. Like the first moment you realize the stars above are not just lights, but distances, and the sphere shimmered with a voice not spoken, but impressed. You bring the seed of return, Ronan. Didn't move, didn't speak, didn't understand, but something inside him did, something that remembered stories. Older than the rebellion, older than Jedi and Sith, stories whispered in the deep black corners of space where the Force flowed. Not in light or dark, but in pattern, in breath, in echo. The child opened their eyes, not wide, not in shock, just open, calm, as though they'd simply remembered who they were, and their gaze met the sphere, and the light pulsed once, and the black crystal beneath cracked with a sound like thunder, muffled by oceans, and Ronan stepped back as the light expanded, not brighter but deeper, as though space itself had opened beneath their feet, and he saw, not visions, not images, but knowing Cloud City wasn't just a city, it was a vessel built atop an anchor, and the Watchers were not. Born of empire, or rebellion, or even war, they were keys, part of a mechanism too large to understand, too old to name, and they had been listening for centuries for this moment, this signal, this child who was never lost but always meant to return. The floor glowed now beneath him. Runes sliding like river stones across the surface, arranging themselves into a circle of light, and the wind returned, Not from vents, not from systems, but from within the chamber itself, spiraling upward in slow, wordless invitation. Then the child spoke, just one word: open. And the light obeyed. A seam appeared in the center of the floor, a downward shaft, lit in colorless glow. Ronan looked once at the child, who now stood unaided, eyes filled not with fear but clarity. Then down at the spiral below. The watchers were no longer following, they were waiting, and the door was no longer metaphor. It was here, and it was open. Into the hollow star. The shaft hummed as they descended, not with the whir of lifts or the chug of motors, but with something softer, deeper, a vibration like the quiet voice of a forgotten star, humming in layers too vast to hear all at once. And as Ronan stood on the gravity disk, with the child beside him and Drip floating just above their shoulders, he felt the motion, not as a fall, but as a sinking into thought, a slow surrender to something older than descent. And the walls around them shimmered with constellations that weren't constellations, but maps, patterns of places he'd never heard of, or perhaps only dreamed, ancient galactic configurations that curved and moved like water under stars. The air grew colder, drier, not from altitude but from age, and the shaft widened until it opened into a vast circular chamber, a hollow space like the inside of a moon, its walls ribbed with bone-white supports and glimmering threads of light that pulsed like veins. And there, suspended at the center of the void, was the machine. It wasn't made of metal, not entirely, and not of stone either. It was both and neither, shaped like a flower in mid-bloom, its petals massive arms that curled around a pulsating orb of translucent force, and within that orb swirled images too fast to comprehend. Battles, stars, people long vanished, Jedi, Sith, machines of war, children laughing, planets burning, silence blooming, and light. Always light, not bright but deep, like the kind that lives behind closed eyes. The child stepped forward first. Their hands reached out, not to touch but to signal, and in response the machine opened, just slightly, like an eye cracking open after centuries of dreamless rest. And the watchers appeared, not from shadows, not in alarm, but already present, as if they had always been here, simply unperceived. Their black armor now faded to gray, their visors pulsing not red but soft violet, and they formed a circle around the chamber, not as jailers, not as soldiers, but as witnesses. Ronan stood back, breath held without thinking, because something sacred had begun. The child turned to him, eyes calm, face expressionless, but filled with something vast, understanding perhaps, or acceptance, and spoke not with voice, but with thought that felt like memory. They built this before the Republic, before the Jedi, before language. This machine was made to listen, to wait, for someone to awaken it, for someone to return with the echo of the stars inside them. And then Ronan felt it, felt why the child had been left in stasis, why the Watchers had observed, why the city had pulsed with presence and whisper. Because this wasn't surveillance, it was preparation. The machine had waited for someone with no allegiance, someone whose soul had never bent to empire or rebellion, Jedi or Sith, someone untouched by the binary fractures of galactic history, someone born into silence and meant to sing. And the child began to hum, soft at first, but clear, and the chamber responded, the machine glowing brighter, the petals opening wider, light rippling through the void in silent waves. And the Watchers bowed their heads, and even Drip dimmed its lights as if in reverence. and the hum became a tone, and the tone became speech, not words, but code. And the code unlocked the memory stored at the center of the Orbe voice, ancient and layered, whispered from the heart of the machine. This galaxy has forgotten what it once knew, but the stars have not. The door is open, not for war, but for returned. The orb pulsed one final time, releasing a wave of gentle force that passed through every being in the chamber. Not painful, not stunning, but cleansing, like mist over heat, like the first breath after storm. And Ronan felt his mind fill not with images, but clarity. That Cloud City was never just a city, never just a mining platform, but a vessel of memory drifting for millennia until its echo returned to the right ears. The child lowered their hands, the light dimmed, the machine quieted, and for the first time in his life, Ronan Vire felt peace, not as stillness, but as understanding. The war had ended long ago, but the galaxy had only just begun to remember what came before. What the light remembers. When they returned to the surface corridors, the city above hadn't changed. Cloud City still floated beneath Bespin's golden sky, its upper rings glowing soft with domestic light. Freight lifts humming across platforms, and distant ships blinking against the dusk horizon like fireflies, returning home. And in the quiet distance, music still played in some forgotten cafe, laughter rising through open decks, unaware of the echoes stirring far below. But something was different, not in the sky, not in the air, but in Ronan. The climb back had been slow, not from fatigue, but from reverence. Every corridor now felt like part of a body, every pipe a whisper, every doorway a breath, and the watchers had vanished without a trace, their presence dissolved like vapor after a dream, leaving behind only silence and the gentle pulse of machinery that now hummed like a heart at rest. Child walked beside him now, fully awake, fully present, but saying nothing, their gaze soft as they watched the lights drift by through the station windows. And though Ronan had asked no questions, the answers still lived within him, not as data, but as knowing, deep and wordless, like the way a pilot understands wind, or the way a soldier recognizes the shape of peace, not in sound, but in its absence. They stood together at the edge of platform Delta 6 as the shuttle landed in a gentle whir of blue light. Tira's voice crackled through the comlink, worried and sharp-edged, and Ronan answered with only 2 words. "It's finished," and that was enough. The child turned once to look back toward the city, the towers, the sky, the cloud-split horizon beyond, and for a moment their eyes shimmered with the light of stars that no longer lived in maps. Stars that remembered things forgotten before the first hyperspace lane was drawn, before names were carved into galactic memory, before silence broke into war. Then they stepped onto the shuttle. No ceremony, no farewell, because some moments do not end, they simply change form. And as the vessel rose into the pale, drifting layers of Bespin's upper sky, Ronan watched the city fade beneath him, its soft rings shrinking until they were just a shimmer in the gaslight. The weight in his chest didn't feel like sorrow, it felt like understanding, because now he knew that Cloud City wasn't only a place, it was a memory engine, a whisper in orbit, a floating echo that had finally sung its story to someone who could listen. He would never speak of what he saw, not to command, not to historians, not even to Tira, but sometimes, when night came and the stars blinked through his viewport, he would close his eyes and hear it again, that quiet hum from deep below, that soundless voice saying not goodbye, but remember. And in the end, that was enough, because peace was never about silence. It was about what the light remembers. Thank you for joining me in the quiet skies of Cloud City. If you enjoyed this soft journey through the galaxy far, far away, you can subscribe for more bedtime stories or explore the playlist below for other adventures among stars and shadow sleep. Well, traveler of the deep sky, and may the Force be with you always.